After 18 months of a blockade, 9 days of bombing, and now a ground invasion, health officials in Gaza are reporting 537 people dead, including some 200 civilians, with a further 2,300 Palestinians injured. Local residents are talking about an unprecedented degree of force and new kinds of explosions. Ceasefire initiatives coming from the United Nations have so far come to naught, with the United States blocking the Security Council from issuing a formal call for an immediate ceasefire as recently as Saturday. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and top foreign ministers for 8 Arab nations are in New York today, Monday. But Israel's foreign minister and prime ministerial candidate Tzipi Livni has appeared to rule out the prospect of any imminent end to the conflict, describing her country's actions as, quote, an ongoing long battle war against terror. One Israeli soldier was killed in the first few hours of this invasion. A further 48 have been injured. A total of 5 Israelis, 3 civilians, and 2 soldiers have been killed since last Saturday, when this Israeli assault started. What are the roots and ramifications of this violence, and why has it been allowed to escalate this way? It's a huge question, especially for us, people in the United States, whose weapons manufacturers are supplying the Israeli forces, and for the whole world that claims to care about human rights but has watched the siege of Gaza become an all-out invasion. Why is the war in Gaza being allowed to continue, and what might stop it? That's some of what we're going to be talking about today. To kick off the conversation, we welcome by phone from Chicago Professor Rashid Khalidi. He's director of the Middle East Institute at Columbia's School of International and Public Affairs and author of The Iron Cage, the story of the Palestinian struggle for statehood. Professor Khalidi, welcome to the program. Welcome to GRITtv.
Thank you, Laura.
Let's start with talking about timing. The telling of this story depends so heavily on when you start the clock. When do you start the clock when you look at the roots of what's happening today in Gaza?
Well, that's absolutely right. Israel enjoys choosing its moments to describe the genesis of issues, and this one in particular has been subject to that kind of arbitrariness. I think we should talk about where the people who live in Gaza come from. They were driven out of their homes in the southern parts of what is today Israel, including the towns and villages that were subjected to Hamas rocket fire. So they are people whose parents or grandparents or themselves were made refugees by Israel's expulsion of them during and after the 1948 war. So they're not just Palestinians who happen to be massed in the Gaza Strip. They're Palestinians who were dispossessed by Israel, whose communities have been turned into the very towns and villages that were recently and are still now being subject to rocket fire. That's the first starting point I would take, and it explains a great deal. The fact that nothing has been done to address the legitimate claims and rights of these people for 60 years, 61, going on 61 years now, is the real root cause of this conflict. The second is the fact that the Gaza Strip has been occupied since 1967. Israel completely controlled the Strip until it withdrew its forces in 2005 and continued to control the Strip from the outside, monitoring entry and exit, controlling imports and exports, denying, as we've seen for the past 18 months, the passage of supplies. So that's a second starting point. A third might be the election of Hamas in 2006, which won the Palestinian parliamentary elections. Another would be the clash in the summer of 2007 when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip after provocation by the Palestinian Authority security forces. So there are numerous starting dates. The one that I would also add is November 4th of this year, when, in the middle of a ceasefire which had reduced the rocket fire to 1 or 2 a month for the preceding 4 months, the Israeli army killed 6 Hamas fighters in an incursion into the Strip, which is the first major violation of the ceasefire.
Now let's talk about that ceasefire, Rashid, before we go on, in case people aren't aware. Tzipi Livni and others talk about their need to act because of this rocket fire. Can you talk about what rocket fire they're talking about? Are these rockets really at the root of anything? And who do we know is really firing them? Is it all Hamas?
Well, it has not only been Hamas, but Hamas has been firing most of the rockets. During the ceasefire, it apparently was not Hamas that was firing most of the rockets. And as I say, and I think this bears repeating and repeating and repeating again, during the period of the ceasefire, which, as I say, broke down in November, started in the summer and broke down in November, there were very few rockets being fired, and most of them, in fact, not from Hamas. Israeli government figures, which used to be on their website and have since been modified, show that for the first 4 months of this ceasefire, July, August, September, and October, there were 1, 8, 1, and 2 rockets fired, a total of 12 rockets in 4 months. Now, that's obviously unacceptable, but the other side of the ceasefire was the opening of the passageways into Gaza. All traffic into and outside of Gaza is completely controlled by Israel and has been stopped. From 700 trucks a day, the amount of goods going in went down in some days to 0. Other days when the Israelis were feeling magnanimous, 60 or 70 or 100. So a seventh, a tenth, or none of the needs of Gaza in terms of everything were being met as a result of this blockade. And this was part of the ceasefire. It wasn't just rocket fire. It was opening the passageways into Gaza and also extending the ceasefire to the West Bank, where Hamas wanted Israel to stop its arrests and assassinations of Hamas personnel. None of that happened. So the ceasefire broke down with the failure to lift the blockade, among many other things, long before the Israeli military decided to provoke Hamas by attacking what they claim was a tunnel-digging party, but killing 6 Hamas operatives and apparently capturing others.